What's up? It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me. Sorry it's been so long.
Not really. You've done a couple in between. I just haven't been able to post a couple of them. One of them,
Yeah,
because
that's true. We got off in the weeds pretty hard on one of them, I think.
yeah, and this might cover up for some of that. Because I could rescue some of that, but this might cover some of the same territory. But then the other one is the Believer review that I'm still going to release,
which sucks because it was the first time that we all got together.
I'm going to release it. I'm going to release it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The only other thing that sucks about it is there were a couple like weird pauses and hesitations. We weren't able to like sit there and monitor the watching so well, and there's a couple times where it kind of froze up, and it's not that bad. But the problem is that we're supposedly synced up to the movie. You know what I mean? And so that sync's going to be off. But whatever, I'll just put it out anyway.
My schedule kind of is wacky because it's during the day when Jared and Flip weren't able to. I don't think be able to. We kind of just did this on a whim. So
yeah, well, I mean, I've been needing to do it, and it's kind of maybe getting out in front, or maybe it's behind because it might be released before this. But I talked with Jacob Hanson for a night, and then that's coming out, and I said some stuff that might irk and irritate, but that's what we're here to do. And I'm getting out in front of some of it because some of what I did was kind of dump on certain types of new atheism, and I wanted to go into a bit more of why, and also catch up with Kevan, and we can talk about it. And I don't know, sometimes we kind of pump through stuff faster because there's not as many commentaries on stuff. And then on top of that too is I don't know if we kind of come at it a little bit more seriously or stuff like that. I mean, but maybe called for it a little bit, although we will be cracking jokes, whatever. So where do I even start though? I made this post on Latter-day Lobsters at one point.
Latter-day Gnostics.
Is that what it is?
That's what it's become.
Yeah. There's green. Oh my gosh, I have too many things open. They'll close as I get through them. This right here, Michael Millerman, which Kevan and I both kind of listen to and follow. He's a bit of a philosopher who comes at stuff from a different angle. One of the reasons I think we got into him is because he was a bit of an expert on Alexander Dugin. That's funny because Kevan and I in high school used to call each other Dukes, and every time I say Dugin, I'm like, hey Dukes, but
Dugans. That was our nickname for each other. That was hilarious.
And we
not that we're all pro Dugan or anything. But like,
yeah. Well, we were curious.
At least Millerman, was curious enough to actually interview the guy, and everybody else is just flipping out because
Millerman is interesting because he kind of made a stand that he wanted to study people like Dugin in his college, and he faced cancellation and all that stuff because he wanted to review what I currently call kind of like Italian elite right-wing philosophers, and nobody wants to touch it because in that world is such a cathedral, which is part of the points of the things we're talking about. You're not allowed to talk and think about certain things because it goes against the religious mythology of the American academics. He says this, and I posted up as a philosophy is well-grounded mysticism, and somebody answers, don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
That's just true, and I'd even question the well-grounded part of it, but maybe some of it, not all of it's well-grounded. Some of the rest of it is that the mysticism maybe sometimes tries to also incorporate what it views and senses in reality a whole lot. But the mysticism part is real. And I don't think, like, the separation of church and state has always been a lie. It's been a lie if ever we've been starting with anything from Plato onward. It is all religious claims. And I think the more and more you read it, the more and more you get down to it, into it, the more and more you just can't deny it beyond stuff like, I mean, Hegel is straight talking about God. I'm going to pull that up a little bit here and all that stuff, but you can maybe say the Platonists have weird different language for it, but then that all got mixed and intermingled with religious philosophy over the past 2,000 years, and they're so interwoven that Jacob Hanson made a post last night claiming that when current day Christians are talking about their God, that they get it mixed up with just a universal principle, which is basically kind of saying that his claim is saying that Randall Christians mix up Platonism entirely for their religion, that the nous and the one is entirely how they see God in Christ, whereas Mormons, they definitely brought it into the material world. They said, no, there's a God and there's Jesus and all that stuff. So it's different. But the point is, I'm stepping back and saying the Platonic stuff was mysticism. It always was a mysticism. Aristotle gets away from it a little bit, but no. And then a lot of the arguments for most people in philosophy since then is basically all philosophy Western philosophy stems off of Plato either trying to deny him or trying to agree with him and maybe re-alter it or reconfigure it around in some way or another. What did you think about philosophy? Kind of like, or did you think like they were all just kind of sticking to rationality their whole entire thing, or what was kind of your angle of it growing up or hearing about it?
Like specifically about are you talking about like Plato and stuff like that?
Just a general, like what did you think philosophy was when you heard that they taught it at universities and stuff?
Well, I took a history of philosophy and religion course in college, and I mean it was kind of like I guess the way I looked at it is sort of like religion without being like, well, I don't know. I mean, it was. I felt like it was like in hindsight, now that I look at it, I see that it was, I do see that philosophy is basically every bit as religious as religion is now, because these are guiding ideas that people are looking to be at the core of their being and being the foundation of why they act in the world the way they do.
And the thing is, like, the subtle point of that is true, but the problem is like the brute big dumb point of that is true. Does that make sense? It's like, just so we don't have to come back to it here, Stephen Hicks here, he's got one of the better books on postmodernism, and I can argue with people inside and out on why he's right and other people who try to criticize him are wrong. But this is him covering Hegel and Hegel's history of philosophy. Almost all leftism, all the way up to current day, Hayek is Hegel, all the way through, right? And look, 69 times he mentions God and the divine in this. Like, you just gotta listen to this, like just a general overview and the review of Hegel's historicism. And when you say historicism in leftist philosophy, they always use these weird words, like what they mean by absolute, and absolute knowledge is different and all that stuff. The word, it's all talking about God. It's all claims and descriptions of God and how to become God and how the state becomes God and divine and God. And you're like, this is the centerpiece for all leftist philosophy for the past 200 years. Mm-hmm. It all stems off of this. You know, you can go back to Kant a little bit too, but I think maybe people are a little bit more aware that Kant was trying to squeeze religion into rationality, right? With his book, The Critique of Pure Reason. It's this is directly God stuff. It's not like Plato, you can kind of say it's subtly that he's referring to a universe one, which I don't know how else you call that anything but a God, you know, but mm-hmm. This is God, you know, but it also stems off of, James Lindsay's been going to this a little bit for a while, and I've gotten through this book already, and it was a head mash, but I'd already heard the stuff before. And if you read enough Nietzsche, you see Nietzsche drop all these names when he goes complaining about Hegel himself, or he goes complaining about, Nietzsche liked Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer hated Hegel. And the reason he was is because he thought he was a fraud, like a mystic, weird, goofy fraud. This book by McKee here, where the crap is it? Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition. The whole thing, God is God only so far as he knows himself. His self-knowledge is further self-consciousness in man, and man's knowledge of God, which proceeds to man's self-knowledge in God. And the whole thing starts out from this point. Hegel is not a philosopher. All of Marxism, all of critical theory, all of Frankfurt Schoolers, all of everything comes out of Hegel. It's all Hegel. He is not a philosopher. Yep. And this guy makes the point, and he points to the different people, and Nietzsche drops all these same names. When James Lindsay talks about it, I say that might as well be Nietzsche talking. Like, I've heard Nietzsche rants on Buime and Eckhart and all these weird mystics too himself. Anyway, so in the teaser that Jacob Hanson put out of our video coming up, his brother Forrest, who sometimes watches our video, came in asking for some clarification on why didn't I immediately attack the truth claims. Yesterday was Martin Luther King Day. How'd you celebrate it? You have a good Martin Luther King Day?
Yeah. It was a Monday.
Did you go around and make sure, let's see, make sure everybody knew about all the sins of Martin Luther King? Like whenever you bring up Martin Luther King, are you sure to make sure that everybody knows about his sins?
Yeah, make sure everybody knows about his affairs and whatnot.
That's the point. Like if we talk about him, we're going to talk about, well, there's some conservative side, but you can see some leftist sides pointing out that he was not really like a biblical Christian, but he did all sorts of nasty things, like plagiarize his PhD and was a philanderer and was in the room. Wait a minute, why am I talking about all this? It was MLK Day. Was that what we were talking about yesterday? Oh, I mean, that's not really the point of MLK Day, right? You know, it's like, oh, how come we didn't bring all this up on MLK Day? Well, some people did, obviously, because people get stuck in the level of critique and pure critique and critique and critique. And that's one of the things Kevan and I have gone on about before, is that when you get put in a hot seat, stuff all of a sudden gets tough. Like there's all sorts of presumptions and mythologies about our liberal hegemony and our country and our universe and our world. And there's stuff that we can go poke at and say, did you know there was sin inside of just recently? Razor Fist released his long video on not long, it's an hour. I'll pull it up here. I can delete something.
It's long for him though.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln, American dictator. And he's got a lot of freaking points in there. That Abraham Lincoln did some horrid stuff and did some very, very anti-liberal stuff. And every time we talk about Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation and all that stuff, should we stop and make sure that we talk about all the horrible stuff and dictatorial stuff that Lincoln did? Yeah. Am I going to deny it? I'm not going to deny it. But it's not always the freaking point when we're talking about like a general overarching claim review of something. Yeah. Let me see here.
It's interesting how black and white we get in our thinking. Quick talks about clear thinking, just black and white thinking when it comes to like history. You know what I mean? And that's the thing is I always take, I guess one of the reasons why hearing about like some of the history that we didn't really hear about with the church growing up, why it didn't bother me so much was that I've always looked at history as being basically just somebody's perspective anyway. I don't take it as literally the way things are all the time in every way. It's history written, obviously the whole saying history written by the victors just shows that histories are written by people from their own perspective and so
so some of the church stuff, when I first heard it, it bothered me, but it wasn't the reason like I fell out of belief or necessarily stuff like that. It wasn't certain moral reasons, but it doesn't bother me anymore.
Well, let me clarify. It's not that I haven't had a little bit of heartburn, but it hasn't rocked my foundations, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got heartburn about Lincoln. I got heartburn about MLK. Thomas Sowell, I was just watching his video about him dissecting the movie Roots and how it was full of crap. And a bunch of other different movies through our Hollywood perception have completely designed an American South that was never exactly like that. Yeah. And that stuff will kind of rock you one way or the other. It'll make you always question your presuppositions. But there's also other mythology in the other side of it, like the concept of the Tulsa riots or Emmett Till's lynching, all that stuff. They always say, do the real history. And you go get into say, okay, let's go do the real history. Yeah. And you do the real history and you find out that those situations were more complicated than you thought. Right. Nothing's this black and white, pure thing that you can say, oh, look, we can make sense of this as our founding mythology for our belief system here. Right. But then you get this larger belief system out of it that's that's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking with Jacob Hanson or I'm talking with Kevan and all that sorts of stuff, I'm usually talking about more of a meta level of like a group level of morality and unification and what some people call pragmatics. People don't realize that often that William James, the guy who was the founder of, not the founder, he was just kind of a noticer. You know, he had his book here, The Varieties of Religious Experience. And that's where he went noticing utility in religious experience and utility in religious communities. And when you go looking at that stuff the same way evil psych people do, and I'll point to, I forget his name, Stephen Stewart, I forget his last name, but he's got the book, the Ape That Understood the Universe, or Jeffrey Miller, or Brett Weinstein talks about this stuff, and David Sloan Wilson. These are Evo Psych guys who talk about the utility of religions up inside of that thing. It says that we're not talking about the true claims down at the bottom level of it. And that's where we all know Peterson and Sam Harris got stuck. Couldn't get out of talking about anything forever. And if some new atheist sees me go and talk with Jacob Hanson, they generally will just want somebody like me to just start poking at their axioms, right? And I'm not there talking about that. But I can poke at your axioms if you'd like me to. I promise I can. We can do that if that's the game that we're gonna play. But Sam Harris.
Yeah, no kidding.
Sam Harris. I mean, if there's anybody in the world who talks about what matters is the truth claim down at the bottom of a thing, but then goes to a pragmatic level, lickety split like that when it suits him, it's Sam Harris. And we just had this whole thing this week of Gad Sad's video. Did you watch Gad's video?
Yeah, I did, with the Malibu meditator.
The Malibu meditator, which is part of the whole thing, is like,
yep,
backing up what Jacob said, and has said multiple times on his website, is that I care how you act. And Peterson talks about you act as if, you know, it's like a lot of times we're pointing at not what you ultimately claim to believe or think is true or not empirically. We're talking about, the point is like, what are you acting like, and how are you justifying your decisions? But or unifying a group, which is a huge point of Durkheim and Durkheim's philosophy and all sorts of different philosophers, William James's philosophy. But there's a larger point with some of the guys Kevan and I have gotten into too about, you know, Spengler and the decline of the West and R.M. McIntyre and these people who are pointing to us like, hey, you guys are, in a weird way, your civilization doesn't realize like you're pointing a gun to your own head. And let's see here. We're going to pull up Sam Harris. I cannot believe how far Sam Harris has fallen.
I know.
Oh, was it on the Facebook? Did I close Facebook?
What scientist isn't serious about practical application?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah. No, he had a whole one this week too. Did you watch that one?
Yeah.
What did he say? He was getting poked by just an average podcaster about the institutions of science and how they're getting corrupted, which is one of the things I talked about Jacob Hanson, which is a point that comes from Foucault, that of course all these lefties will back off now, because now they've pulled a full swipe around to, they back every institution and every single intelligence agency without even second thought now, because they're in power.
Well, see, that's where, like, you know, things are aging well for Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying, and they're not aging well for Neil deGrasse Tyson. They're not aging well for Sam Harris.
Yeah, and they can't, and they're supposedly the ones who say, in the face of evidence, we now be humble. There was so much talk back in the New Atheism day. There was all this old story of Richard Dawkins talking about somebody being corrected in the scientific community. Yeah. And there was not a dry eye in the house when the other person said, you have corrected me. And it's a lie. And that's always been a lie in scientific communities. I mean, some people have done it. But most times egos get in the way. And that's part of the problem with the new atheist world.
Yep.
Is your ego's in the way of seeing where you can rescue or hold on to religious things, because we must redo it because the religious way was wrong. We've deconstructed that. We've deconstructed nothing else, zero else. We don't realize that the deconstruction powers go all the way down, but we've deconstructed the religious that kind of made us mad when we were young. Let's see here. So this, we can't show the whole video.
If grandma had balls, she'd be grandpa.
Yeah, so Sam Harris's whole point, we won't show the whole video because people can go watch it. But
that's
Sam
classic.
goes in this whole entire thing that if all the variables had been different, I would have been right. And then I would have acted correctly. And Brett Weinstein would sure have some egg on his face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so unbelievably dumb. But we already know that Sam Harris in the past has already gone into things of saying he doesn't care about truth at the bottom of political claims because he thinks there's a larger existential threat. But that's one of the things that Peterson was trying to tell him or think about or get, that what's truer than true is like, he wanted to get down to the point, like if the atom bomb blows something up, it's true at the bottom that atom bomb will blow everything up, but it's not pragmatically, it's true that civilization will end itself and all of their presuppositions. Any sort of epistemology they had doesn't exist anymore. So what is even truth, But that's kind of one of my points with, I've talked before about the TV show Deadwood from HBO is one of the things that made me stop and chill on some of the concepts of polygamy and how the West was in the United States of America, and thinking that, oh, this is so bad and that's so bad, and oh my gosh, they did the thing there. One of the things about that show is not just showing like how tough and wild the West was and how it's not so easy to just give property to women and have all our modern day bullshit new neoliberal assumptions have to apply to people of that time frame, which is it's one of the hardest things for people to break out, is realize that your head's got to break out. You really got to deconstruct the neoliberal hegemony you've been living, the post-war hegemony you've been living under, if you really are a deconstructor, and think that things were different outside of that. And outside of that, things weren't so obvious that this is good and that's bad and that's bad and this is good. But one of the points of that whole TV show is the very first season, there's this horrible, tough guy who is a philanderer and a murderer who runs a bar inside of one of the towns in Deadwood. And then there's this hardcore good guy who comes and he's the cop, and then they battle out through the whole first season. Well, by the latter season, a bunch of Pinkertons and government starts swooping in on that frontier, and it's almost kind of like the New World Order. It's the WEF is coming in down on them, and they're going to buy them up, all of them. And at that point, the squibbles that bar owner and that sheriff had, they say, hey, we got a bigger problem here. And they unite, So the two people who were against each other in like the first season, like picking on each other about their little territorial issues inside of a little town, they say, wait a minute, we've got a great bigger threat here. Let's stop bickering about us and worry about this great bigger threat coming down in on us, of this globalizing force of bullcrap that really is totalitarianism. Let me see here. So Gad just lights into afterwards.
So this has nothing to do with Sam Harris, because the examples that I was discussing from my book, that specific ancient Greek example, stemmed from my family. So if I can go after my family, I can go after Sam Harris, right? So to the idiots who might say, oh, you're obsessed with Sam Harris, I couldn't give a damn about Sam Harris. I've gone after people that are unbelievably more important to me than Sam Harris, my own flesh and blood. I despise that kind of hubris, faux hubris, arrogance. So here's what I posted yesterday. I'm going to read you a bunch of tweets in reference to that 5-minute clip that you just read. Solid logic from my intellectual hero, the Malibu Meditator. Quote, imagine for a second that tarot cards cured all forms of cancer. People would be less likely to criticize tarot cards then. Also, if grandma had balls, we would have called her fucking grandpa. Then I'll go on. Let's assume that jumping from a building did not kill you because of gravity. If friction operated in the opposite direction to gravity, you could jump off a building and not get hurt. Also, if my aunt had balls, we'd call her Uncle Roscoe, physicist, Malibu meditator. Then I go on. Imagine for a moment that cancer, I'm just waking up with the Exhale app. Imagine for a moment that cancer was nothing more than multiple orgasms. Then we would not be fighting cancer because it would be pleasurable. So all I'm saying is that if my grandma had balls, she'd be called my grandpa, the Malibu meditator. Let's go on because maybe the examples are not.
Oh, you get
Isn't
the
that
point.
is the app that he referenced was isn't that Sam's app?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the points that we
See,
get
and
into,
going
too.
back, we're gonna
Go ahead.
go in that direction, but this is where he's organizing. We talked about that before we started.
Well, I mean, we just say it now is that so there's the philosophical Platonists who we say go constructing cobwebs and sandcastles in their head that you could say are every bit as much a religion as other religions. But then you also have in the West the people who push against that, which are the analytical philosophers. And Sam Harris, you could kind of claim, tries to play or live in that realm, or the naturalistic philosophers like Quine or something like that. But they always have their problems too. And that problem works in this meme right here, if I could show it. Analytical philosophers be like, Kant is wrong because, and then he's got this stuff that comes from Wittgenstein, which Wittgenstein got really heavily into trying to map out and chart out the whole entire world. And this is, I've repeated it often several times, but it really does get like this. It's like, it gets down to a point where like you guys have tried to map stuff out so hard that you've constructed this monstrosity. And it is that monstrosity at the end of it when you stop and look back at it. And people think Wittgenstein was about as close as it gets. And here's one of the funny things about Wittgenstein is that he backed off of it. It's pretty famous in philosophy that like later on in his life, he's like, yeah, I was a young autistic buxom boy and I went a bit far with that. And he kind of actually leaned back to the people who construct the sandcastles, right? And this is you see here. But as Kevan and I pointed out, is that Wittgenstein, being as smart as he was or whatever, this is Bertrand Russell's review and irritation with getting upset at he says, later, Wittgenstein, on the contrary, seems to have grown tired of serious thinking and invented a doctrine that would have made such activity unnecessary. And Bertrand Russell wanted to stay hard atheist his whole entire life. He's the guy who invented that teapot thing. Have you heard the thing about like, maybe there's a teapot out floating around the sun? I don't know. It's a thought on not being able to disprove something that's floating out there. Like I can't disprove that there's not a teapot floating around the sun. Anyway, he's a pretty famous analytical philosopher from England, and he loved Wittgenstein, and Wittgenstein tried to break stuff down as the logical positivists do. And then you have Heidegger and those guys who push back on the phenomenologists who said, you guys can't account for all things for how humans act, just going off of the five senses and these hard breakdowns. My point is with that is that we can back off of getting super specific about, I just want to say too, I drop a lot of names and a lot of philosophers' names, and I did on Jacob Hanson's podcast. And I'm telling you, and I'm dead serious, and I'm honest in this, is that I sincerely think that every philosopher I've read has made me dumber. So like, I'm showing off my ignorance on double speed, because it's honestly true. Like I sometimes think about like people get like all up in their heads about Heidegger, he really showed us like how being and living and acting in the world, and those are two different things, and becoming what you are and all. And I go, man, young Mormon me thought about that stuff well enough. Mormonism gave me a framework for that.
Yeah.
I didn't have to get all stupid.
We're talking about that crap when we were seniors in high school, out on your front porch,
And it didn't have to go to elephant brain levels on stills.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's kind of one of our points is that even when those guys do that, you get down to the bottom of it, And you see something like I pointed out in an argument, not an argument, discussion between Boghossian and Sargon of Akkad that they had, where they get into discussing how do we find an ultimate morality, that both of them at one level or another appealed to something like a God, which is some AI thing is going to map it all out and give us the answer for it. And it's going to have all the answers in the world. And it'll be like the homework machine in Shel Silverstein, right? It's like it prints out a thing. Have you ever seen that picture of that?
Yeah, I can't remember.
The homework machine, the homework machine, most perfect contraption that's ever been seen. Just put in your homework, then drop in a dime, snap on a switch and turn, and in 10 seconds time, your homework comes out quick and clean as can be. Here it is, 9 + 4, and the answer is 3. Oh me, I guess it's not as perfect as I thought it would be. But if you look at the larger picture of it, I think somebody kind of pointed this out over on Lobsters. They pointed out, like, they asked ChatGPT a question that was just a riddle, and it got so duped by the riddle. It was like, Mike's mom had 4 children. 3 of their names were Kate, Kelly, and Jim. What was her 4th child's name? And it's right there. It's Mike's mom, Mike, And the thing can get in. Like, you have not provided me enough information. You have not provided me enough information. But I'm sure that they can get on top of that. But what I'm saying too is, like, these are the machines that you guys that Boghossian appealed to say that it's going to give us the correct answer for our morality. I posted on my Facebook yesterday a poll about how many chuggas come before the word choo-choo. And I think my joke always is people just can't agree on numbers. And that's why we're not going to be able to land on stuff that are gut decisions. Like, some people said there's 8 chuggas, chugga, 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 chugga. Some people said 3. Is that sound over at your house? But I like this picture of the machine. It's like down at the inside of it is this kid. Which is,
no kidding.
It's ultimately what the truth of it is. It's just us and that AI, spitting our crap back out.
Well, so Arn McIntyre just a couple of days ago had a video on artificial intelligence, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he had a software developer on that was kind of talking, that was pretty had a pretty good understanding of it. And in some ways he was saying, look, it's not going to be as bad as we thought. And in other ways he was saying, yeah, it's going to be as bad as we thought. You know what I mean? But, like, a lot of what he was talking about, and especially when it comes down to, there's certainly, when you get into asking questions of morality in this AI, it's built upon the morality, the moral frameworks of Silicon Valley. And so it's limited to that. I mean, you can't, like, it can do a pretty good job at sourcing and, information from different, like it could probably give it. And I've looked into it a little bit, but I haven't. But it kind of seems a little off to me. But, like, when you ask questions about Mormonism and stuff like that, it kind of sounds a little weird, I think.
Well, we saw this. I pulled this up. I posted this on Latter-day Lobsters, but this guy pulled up, are you living out a cultural script so cliched that even ChatGPT can narrate your journey? If you're an evangelical toying with deconstruction, the answer is probably yes. Here are 3 versions of the same story. I'll read one of them, but it's like, write a personal essay from the perspective of a 30-year-old woman who has recently deconstructed her evangelical Christian faith and wants others to do the same. Or write a person from a white woman who, so you read the thing. And is that showing that on the screen, the gray?
Yeah, it's kind of small.
As a 30-year-old white woman, I have recently gone through a process of deconstructing my evangelical Christian faith. This process has been both painful and liberating, and I want to share my story in the hopes that it might help others who may be going through similar struggles. For most of my life, I have been a devout Christian raised in an evangelical household and active in the church.
That's brilliant.
Community.
I just had to throw that in there.
Thanks, John DeLynn. John DeLynn has been very hard on me. Are you sorry?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, John DeLynn. I believed in the Bible as the literal word of God, and I was convinced.
That must have been so hard for you.
It was. Well, thank you. And salvation could only be found through faith in Jesus Christ. But as I grew older and began, let me go down, because this is a white woman. So down, as I also understood that my privilege as a white person had allowed me to have a cushy life where my belief system was not challenged and I had the luxury of deconstructing my faith, I realized that this is not the case for people of color who have to fight against systemic oppression and racism on a daily basis. This realization made me even more committed to using my privilege for good and being an ally for marginalized communities. Moral smuggling. So this is one of the points on the last podcast. I keep talking about, I think Mormons have sharpened their knives, and I don't know if that's the right metaphor. I think it is the metaphor, but like the point is that when I'm talking about that, I'm saying like you come prepared for debate. The John Stuart Mill thing. If you only know part your own side, you only know half the argument, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by sharpened knives, I don't mean somebody wins or doesn't win. I mean, like, you just come in more prepared. You prep before. The other people are coming with dull knives. And my opinion is that Larson and DeLynn and those guys have super dull knives because they've censored themselves right out of arguments. They can't even get into it because they're incapable of being able to even be helpful for anything because they don't even know arguments against themselves. And Mormons know the arguments against themselves. They come prepared. And we're going to talk about John Vervaeke a little bit later. But he is one of my examples of somebody who's got super, super, super sharp knives. And what I mean by that is it doesn't mean he's right. It means that if I come at him with an argument, he's going to regurgitate back to me my argument better than I put it and tell me 3 books of people who said the same thing. Does that make sense? And that's how I think a lot of Mormon and Mormon apologists have gotten their knives sharper, whereas DeLynn could not even tell you anything but a straw man version of what people know are some of the theories that he wholeheartedly backs through his actions, and he doesn't even know what they are. And that's more of, are you being what you're being, or are you being what you're saying you're being? Or as Kevan and I will pull up later, is you're doing it. You're doing it.
You're doing it, Peter.
You're doing it, Peter. You're pretending with us. So this is a series, and I think it got turned into a book, How Dawkins Got Pwned. Unqualified reservations. That's Mencius, Moldbug. There's too many arguments in it to even start to get into it. But it's like you're not even starting. And this is 15 freaking years old. You know what I mean? Like and the stuff that's important to the context, because the stuff he predicts in it is part of why so many people are following him. You know, and he predicts it's going to go down this rabbit hole of wokeism and social justice and universal super global homo, everybody fall in line with the what's the most recent thing James Lindsay's been on about, where they said they're going to be talking about sustainability and turning everything into climate change, and then that becoming its own death cult and smuggling in all sorts of morality in about that. Anyway, this chapter right here, M.41 and M.42, the point of that is, if you go around calling your religion, or religion as always just having been a parasite, that parasite was M.41, and your new one is M.42. You didn't get out of it. You're inside of another one, and there's all sorts of people who push back on this stuff, like, where's the God? Where's this, that, the other? James Lindsay has a long...
Is M stand for morality?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. And he just was saying, like, giving it a number as if you gave a...
Right, yeah.
That's a good point, though.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah. It's just... And it leans on the old stuff, but it also invents its own new stuff.
Right.
And stuff. But anyway, people have to even understand or get through all this and get through of talking about how Dawkins and people like Dawkins not only have a new universalist morality, and it really stems off of what he himself admits. He uses zeitgeist, which is Hegel. He uses Einsteinian or Spinoza's God, which stems back to the Platonic God and all that sorts of stuff. And that's where he starts using those sorts of things to appeal to moralities. And you're doing it, Peter, you're doing it. And there's been a lot of pushback on that it's like an esoteric kind of claim. It's not kind of. It's 100% you are doing it. So we were pushing back on Jacob Hanson's brother, and I said it to him, and I even told him I'd bring it up. So I'm not trying to gouge and poke at you, but that's one of the points, is you have a channel that's about gouging and poking. But one of the things Kevan and I have been on about for a long time is we can get you questioning what a chair is or not, which is one of the basic points of like philosophy and the Socratic method and all that stuff, is that if you're on the hot seat and you're posing and you're positing something positive, watch out. You know, it's because it's real easy to start poking on you.
Because that's what deconstruction is.
Yeah. So I pointed out that, come back to that one of his videos where he goes and posits a positive view of the world is he points out, I should show this. We can, I can loop it in.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Doing what?
Using your imagination, Peter. You're playing with us, Peter. You're doing it, Peter. Look, you're doing it. See?
You can throw. You can fight.
Bring your football, Peter.
Bangarang, Sam Harris. Bangarang, John DeLynn.
Bang. Let's see here. So, and one of my things about your channels, I mean, obviously your channel's built on it, and I think one of the things I've seen a lot of different people, and in this world, the world of tech world, the world where Kevan and I were talking earlier, this AI world is going to push Silicon Valley ideas. And I'm not saying we're shadow banned or anything, because we don't go pushing our stuff.
It already is.
But we don't
That's-
advertise stuff out there. But if you have a straight anti-Mormon channel, you're going to build faster. And it's going to go around through the
It already
algorithms.
is. I mean, look at it. Within I don't know how long. I mean, it hasn't been very long, and I'll just come out and say it. Like, woke ideology is now like so ubiquitous in our society. And why? Because of the internet. And why? Because of Silicon Valley morality.
Yeah. And just like the Chat GPT could make those written statements, I feel like Chat GPT could make these channels. And I'm not just saying that, like, I think Forrest has a good perspective. I'm not saying like he's 100% correct, but I'm saying he's got good points of, he thinks hard about stuff, and he looks at stuff, and he's able to kind of pick apart stuff well. You're better than DeLynn and Larson, Forrest, for sure.
But Chris still wants to fight you.
Well, he's not. That's the point. I was going to fight on his side against the Midnight Mormons,
No,
but that's part of one of the deals. The Midnight Mormons are my buddies, and I agree with them on a whole lot of stuff. And I think they have a right to exist, right? Just like I think you have a right to exist with your deconstruction channel. But it's evangelical. You're being evangelical for M.42. You're evangelical for M.42. And I hear that he's conservative and more on the conservative level.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing that I'm looking at it. Like my thing, Forrest, is that when I look at some of your stuff, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm sounding like an old man now, but I mean, kind of seem like a young buck that hasn't like that thinks. But that here's the thing: your thinking is going to take you on a journey, man, and you're not going to think the same thing in 5 years.
Yeah, and we're not saying that means that you go believing in Mormonism again, but
I'm not saying that
you might curb off a whole lot of like, hey, it's real important to, but at the same time too, there's audience capture and all that sorts of stuff too, where you start getting attention and things, and so then you double in and double in and double into a thing. But
he comes across as pretty intellectually honest to me, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Unlike so many others, you know, out there.
100%.
So
and he's got a lot of good points in there for sure. And I even appreciate some of his points like about Peterson, although I pushed back on that because that was our video that Kevan and I didn't release. It was actually kind of talking about between Jacob, because Jacob, I could push back on Jacob a little bit too. That
I kind of feel like right now I'm kind of like backpedaling because I think we might have gone a little bit hard on Forrest in that video that we didn't release.
Well, it was just kind of talking about the same stuff, but but it was also kind of talking about, because Jacob was saying that you can't land on a logos, and my point in that video is that Western philosophy is landing on the same logos of the thing that you're talking about, or a lot of people claim is basically the same thing. Logos is the nous in Platonism. It's all been the same, and it's always all been the same inside of that stuff. And a lot of people leaning on those things are still leaning on stuff that might even be older than Christianity. That doesn't mean that, like I said to Kevin before, is like maybe what these philosophers were noticing was something in the universe that sure seems to act like what is currently the Christian gods, you know, but that's what they were noticing or claiming to notice. And then a lot of philosophers, including Hegel, because there's inversions of it. That's one of the things I talk about with Jacob, including Marx and Hegel. They're bouncing off of that, but all the way up through Kant, all the way up through all sorts of transcendent philosophers. They're leaning on those same ideas. So I could push back on Jacob and say, you don't necessarily have to believe in a God, at least not the physical one. That even the presuppositionalists will get, some people who are Christians will push back on that whole thing, saying that you then still have to posit, you still have to assert the stuff after that. But I won't even get into it. What I'm saying is that any individual can still kind of lean on the same concepts, even though they don't believe in that God the exact same way as you do, or that it's not necessarily a being. That was how we were pushing on Jacob. But then when we were pushing on Forrest, we were saying, he says Peterson's an atheist. And I said, no, Peterson's a Platonist. He's a Jungian Platonist. It's 100% Platonism, which leans on that one, which is, Platonism has been done and redone and done and redone and then put into different religions through Aquinas and Avicenna and in Islam. If you look at Islam, the way they talk about the one and the prime, they call it like a prime mover, I forget, like the first explanation or something like that, which is the same thing Aristotle would have called it, or Maimonides in Judaism, or the Kabbalah. It's all interwoven and intermarried into the same stuff. And one of the things that I think Jacob kind of points out is that he believes certain Christians are accidentally more Platonists. They're more talking this than they are talking just like a real flesh existent God and Jesus, right? But it's still kind of like acts the same way. But the nous is the logos, the Jesus, the one is the God, and all that sorts of stuff. And people can also argue, this is when we get to Vervaeke is leaning and holding on to this stuff, but trying to describe it from an analytical level. So he's trying to lean on Platonism while being an atheist. But this stuff right here, what was I getting on here, is Peterson. Peterson 100% leans on this. And I think when he gets struggling in his mind of saying, do I all the way believe, do you all believe? I think he believes this 100%. Then his other question is the one a physical being that's there and existent? Is the nous a physical being that is Christ? Like, that's where, like, Peterson believes in this 100. The last little step he doesn't believe, or won't admit to it believe yet, or maybe believes, is that jump of it being the same beings that Jacob or Kevan believe in. Does that make sense? And I think sometimes I do think he maybe hides the ball, but he only doesn't want to say that because he knows people like atheists, like most atheists I've known, shut down the second you do say you believe. And I hold on to the term atheism and say all that sorts of stuff too, because I know atheists shut down if I try to talk to them at all, unless you first declare that you're part of the tribe. You got to give off the shibboleth that you're part of it. And atheists are not open-minded people.
Why do you think that they do that?
Why do they shut down?
Yeah,
it's tribal. It's tribal like anything.
Yeah. See, that's kind of what I've kind of noticed. It's like, well, I see the tribalism, but I also see this disgust mechanism.
Yeah,
it comes into play. It's like, oh, this is like something I don't like. I don't want to talk about this, in this way. And I think that, when it comes down to, like, you're kind of talking about some of these philosophies and stuff like that. And I think that sometimes people want to have like a philosophy, but they don't want it tainted by another philosophy that has aspects that they don't like.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's kind of a lot of the evolution of philosophy, from my perspective.
You're absolutely right. And so here's Vervaeke, the atheist, who's kind of trying to rescue Neoplatonism, which in his rescue of it, he's trying to say that you atheists or you religious people can come along with me because we can all kind of unite around that pyramid idea. And I have analytical cognitive science stuff to point to what that stuff might have been referring to if we were in a completely atheistic world. Or it could also point to the thing that Pajau or Vanderklay or Kevan or Jacob leads to. I'm not saying what it points to, but I'm saying we can use the same structure because he describes it like this.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Arthur Burst Lewis that I think Neoplatonism is kind of like the spiritual grammar of the West.
He calls it the spiritual grammar, and then you can see here too that he, the atheist, talks about
as to what is beyond
the narrative, the non-propositional, the non-narrative in some fashion, the relationship to the good or to the one.
He's talking about his whole series, and this is one of the things we're going to end on, is talking because this is all in prep that we're going to try to review his After Socrates series, which I think, well, I'm right about, is his attempt to try to recreate a communal thing that's getting lost in the West, of everybody being able to look the same direction at something, even though everybody's all deconstructed. And we'll get to that when we get to it. But that's him pointing out here, saying right in the open that it's Neoplatonism and that it's a spiritual grammar, and it all refers back to the one and the nous and the logos and all that sorts of stuff. And but then Plato and Aristotle were the best of it. Like people who later ran with it, like Hegel, like it full on, like I'm saying, it went full religion, or Rousseau, and all of leftism comes out of Rousseau. Oh, by the way, did you know that Rousseau abandoned all 5 of his children? What a piece of shit Rousseau was. But why do I say that? Well, because we get back to this movie that one of the only times, because he doesn't often do it, besides positing that leaving religion will 1, 2, 3, voila, make things better for you. Because you could call that a positive claim, but that's been the positive claim of the new atheists that I think has been thoroughly debunked just by the world happening. Does that make sense? Then I got to pull up that one by Brule. Did you listen to the one by Brule talking about definitions of new atheists?
I missed that one.
Okay, I'll pull it in a second.
You gave me too much homework and too little time.
Yeah, it was too fast. So this is for us. We won't even go over it, but so we made fun of this movie before Forrest released it, you know. But I think the movie is actually a warning against this 100%, which Forrest isn't 100%. He's not ignorant to, although he thinks that the concept of it is back off. I think the movie might even be worse. It might even be straight up saying, "Hey, this dude was Looney Tunes," you know. Anyway, Captain Fantastic's a movie about this guy who goes off into the woods because he's deconstructed society, and he's going off and shunning materialism and going off into the world to educate his kids in the forest away from all the techno future and man and his technique. Oh gosh, we got to get to that. And says that this movie, I mean, somewhere else he says it, that this is one of his favorite movies to discuss Mormonism and leaving a high demand of religion and all that sorts of stuff. But he kind of points to it and he says, sure, you can go too far with this stuff, but he points to it as a good example of becoming a properly deconstructed family where you're super intelligent, super whatever. All of this is Rousseau. It comes from Rousseau, that piece of crap who abandoned his family. But I think that's maybe hinted at in this movie a little bit. You overlooked that the mother went crazy and committed suicide. In some sort of levels, that's abandoning your family, right? Leaving them out in the wilderness with the nutty dad. But who knows why she had those mental health issues. That movie has this moment in it. Well, it has the moment where, and that's one of the points we pulled up earlier, where they all worship. They have Noam Chomsky Day, and maybe it's like it's kind of doing it tongue in cheek or something like that.
That didn't age well either.
No, yeah, because Chomsky's gone back on. Not only is Chomsky, because Chomsky has his issues, and I've looked at the stuff of Chomsky. So Chomsky's not Rousseau. Chomsky's a little more based in the scientific world, right? But he still will do stuff like, I pulled up this whole thing, like look up Zizek and what Zizek says about Chomsky. And Zizek is just baffled about how Chomsky became an apologist for the Khmer Rouge. And it's because he holds so strongly to his noble savage ideas that comes out of Rousseau, that if we just go back to society and get away from this imperialism, that's the good, that he did not want to see that the Khmer Rouge became extremely horrible, terrible, murderous killers, right? And let's see.
And then throw in his his thoughts on his hardline thoughts on mandating vaccine.
Yeah. So he's the anarchist who's been this anarchist against imperialism all our whole lives. And now all of a sudden he's a scared old guy who says, just go along with the BioPower of the state, all the way back to Foucault. Did he make Foucault right from their debate? I mean, that's one of the things I bring up with Jacob Hanson. Is one of the best stuff that came out of Foucault was Foucault talking about science becoming a power institution instead of a science institution. But Foucault's view of that is that it can only be a power institution, and that's, once again, you go too far with something. Like, no, I think
we should talk about his personal life too.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Foucault? Got to talk about kitty diddling. I mean, every single thing in the world. Let's stop and make sure, like a prayer. It's like a land acknowledgement. We must acknowledge that, you know, we can imagine a world with no heaven. Imagine there's no, wait, John Lennon beat his wife. Like, okay, well, let's, so there's this moment in it, and I've already told Forrest about it, but.
Sorry. Are you coming in? No, okay. Bye.
Here, boy, I got that. Go talk to him. You got time.
Ask her what she thinks of the working people creating an armed revolution against the exploiting classes in their state structures.
Well, Marxists can be just as genocidal as capitalists.
Or whether or not she's a dialectical materialist and accords primacy to the class struggle.
Avoid Marxism. Or telling her you're a Trotskyite.
Trotskyist. Only a Stalinist would call the Trotskyist a Trotskyite. And I'm not a Trotskyist anymore. I'm a Maoist.
Right.
So, I mean, that scene is nothing but a cutting scene on what this family's doing to this kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's, but of course, everybody watched this movie as if it's like a positive view of the family. But it not only shows that having him out in the forest, away from people and all that sorts of stuff, makes him a weird autist when he gets around girls, but it also shows how the youth, when they get into this whole world of critique and criticize down, and it's one of the things I bring up with Jacob, they become what I call Maoist. This kid's just straightforward with it. But my point is,
which is also an ironic tenet of Maoism, that they were all about what the Red Guard was young kids. It's the indoctrination of kids. That's who is going to push forward the revolution.
And one of the big points of James Lindsay, which I regurgitate all the time too, because I think it's 100% true, is the whole entire movement of the critical theory Frankfurt School, Marcuse world, is to try to turn children and turn the disenfranchised into Maoists. That's the point of everything that's got going on here. Mao, who did Mao get heavily doodly influenced by? Hegel. Hegel was Mao was a big fan of Hegel, and people think Gramsci more than likely, although we don't have direct proof, but he directly implemented some Gramscian ideas in his Cultural Revolution, and we have some hints that he had access to Gramsci's books. But he is definitely a Hegelian Marxist, 100%, which stems back to Rousseau and the Noble Savage, and we'll all go back to, first I wanted to do this, because then we got to the Distributist video, which is, oh goodness gracious. Noam Chomsky Day. So,
flawed exit strategy. Everyone went out the same doors. No one utilized the loading dock area at all.
The Khmer Rouge wasn't that
Would all be trapped.
Inadequately planned extraction point. You probably shouldn't have all gone directly to the bus. Predetermined pickups would have been much less risky.
On the plus side, mission free the food accomplished.
Mission! Free the food!
Top marks all around. Now, if you'd all do me a favor.
oh, they just got back from stealing food and called it freeing food.
And close your eyes. You may open your eyes. Happy Noam Chomsky Day.
But Noam was born on December 7th.
Well, we're celebrating it today.
Sugar. They got pictures. This is so making fun of these guys. Like
Yeah.
Uncle Noam, it's the day of your birth.
This isn't religious at all.
it's tongue in cheek, man. But this is actually the part I want to get at here.
Here we go. Nice.
Yes.
Motivate. Reliant.
Bro,
Healer, whisper, massage. All right, go for it.
Dad,
55-pound pull, laminated wooden glass.
Oh, a K-bar fighting knife?
That's right.
Thanks, Dad. So beautiful.
7-inch blade, partially serrated, well balanced if you dip when you cut.
The joy of sex. The joy of sex.
Yeah, no kidding.
Those are Blackstone broadheads, razor sharp.
Just deconstruct what is age. I mean, that's
Yeah.
Foucault, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's never too
Straight
young,
up.
so.
What kind of crazy person celebrates Noam Chomsky's birthday like it's some kind of official holiday?
Kid's thinking for himself. Wait a minute, but family's thinking for themselves, and the kid's now just trying to reify himself back into the, we can get into dialectic of enlightenment stuff later.
Why can't we celebrate Christmas like the rest of the entire world?
You would prefer to celebrate a magical, fictitious elf instead of a living humanitarian who's done so much to promote human rights and understanding?
Until COVID came.
Let's have a discourse.
Let's have a discourse.
Forget it.
No, explain.
Here it is. Sources, please. That's what I'm saying. This is like a real life version of like they surround the kid, they put him in a weird spot. He says, "Hey, this sucks. I'm just going on my gut here saying this sucks." And then, no, what are your sources? Sources, please. And that's just such an example of that type of thing. But like in the video of my little teaser clip with Jacob, there's all sorts of people in the thing saying, "What are your sources that the atheist community fell apart?" Or "What are your sources?" That then they'll say stuff like, "Only 5% of people are atheists. What are you talking about? But we're taking over. Religion's going for the dodos. Religion's going for the dodos." Like, which one is it? And, you kettle logic goofs.
Take the opportunity to make your case. We're all open to hearing your arguments. If they're valid and you persuade us, I'm sure we'd all be willing to change our minds.
Sure. Sources. Yeah. Give us a, is there a study? Is there a source?
Use your words.
Sure. This one, I'll just let it speak for itself for a minute here. So this is a distributist. He's one of the dissident rights, one of the more intelligent ex-atheist. I sometimes wonder if he's sincere in that or not. I mean, it's not really generally my business or not, because I'm generally one who thinks, I think if you are faking it, you can be just as much as a problem. Like that's one of the reasons I go into it with Jacob Hanson, saying that I think true belief is important, because there's all sorts of people faking belief that use religion politically.
Right.
Dan McClellan.
Yeah,
and
Dan.
I don't want to be that person. Like I want a road to Damascus. It doesn't have to be exactly that like moment. Like I'm not going to come fake it, but it'd have to be honest if I was going to be doing something like that. But I'm not going to go present myself like, "Hey, Mormons, I'm here. I'm back in your religion, and I'm here to guide you correctly politically because I know the ways and stuff." But kind of fake being. And I'm not saying Distributist does this. I am saying Dan McClellan does that, but from the left. I'm 100% saying Dan McClellan does that, and I squinted Jackson Washburn too.
Gravitating toward them as narrative tools, and no one is saying this is the world that I want to live in, unless they finally did say, "This is the world I want to live in." Sometime in late December, a video dropped on YouTube. Not just any video, but the video. The one that showed the future, the science fiction destiny of the progressive vision for humanity in all its aesthetic and moral glory. And at once, almost every left-wing Twitter account I could see, and admittedly, I stuck my hands in the cookie jar and looked at Twitter, but only because it came up on Telegram, I promise. And it was universal. You would have thousands of tweets looking at this video, and they would say things like, "This is a solar punk future I'm fighting for. This is the vision we all want. What I wouldn't give to live here." And of course, that's music to my own ears. It answers the question. And the accounts that were echoing this applause, these weren't boomer hippies. These were the Zoomer, the millennials that watched BreadTube. Had it finally happened? Had the left discarded its cynicism to tell the world what they actually wanted? Maybe, but since this is a multimedia presentation, at this point, we're going to watch this.
Speed it up a little. Are you seeing the video?
Yeah.
Look how Captain Fantastic it is. Except there's techno stuff going on too. We're still smart.
It's very different, but this is important. I think this is important. I mean, this is powerful stuff, right? I mean, I'm a black-hearted reactionary, and I wouldn't mind living in this world. I think the Hayao Miyazaki animation really does sell us on the beauty of the world, its groundedness, the deep connections each of the characters have to the land and to each other. It's truly superb, and you're probably thinking that some crack team of anarchist animators spent day and night putting this little 1-minute clip together. Well, not quite. This is actually a corporate ad for yogurt. Shivani specific. It's edited so you can't see that, right? But indeed it is. Yes, in case you didn't notice that last shot, and I don't know if it made it into this one or not, but it seems that if you look at the refrigerator, the only thing that the denizens of this utopia eat that isn't pried whole from the bosom of Mother Earth are Chobani corporate products with their brand name completely visible. And of course, we're laughing, and a lot of conservatives, pretty much everyone on the right, was all of us with the hypocrisy line as usual. But they seem to miss the real power of this. The left was being honest. They were telling us what they wanted. They were giving us a positive vision of the future, and this is nothing if not a learning experience. So why not look closer? Perhaps you're probably saying where I'm going with this, but my first reaction to seeing this and trying to take it in earnestly is to kind of squint at it. This might this solar punk future of pastoral human farmers be a little bit reactionary, dare I say? I think it was LP from the I Hypocrite channel who pointed this out first. But why does the left-wing vision of utopia look so much like Amish life with more robots? And in fact,
Amish life with more robots.
Is this a left-wing vision altogether? Why do we know it's leftist? It's hard to say. The adjectives we might associate with.
And there aren't robots in Captain Fantastic, but you notice they had those nice bows and arrows and those nice knives and those nice.
This vision would be cozy, grounded, and human, words we don't often associate with the modern left. And despite the fact that this is called solar punk, there's nothing punk about it. The only elements that make this vision left-wing are certain details, which also contain strange ambiguities. Now here we need to be fair. This isn't an engineering plan for the future, and it's inappropriate to dissect its technical feasibility. Nevertheless, there are narrative contradictions, aesthetic contradictions that reveal things about what makes this text attractive and what makes it leftist. And it seems for every answer or any unanswered question on screen, if one were to fill in the details, the community depicted would get a lot less cozy, a lot less real, or a lot less left-wing. Take, for instance, the space-age technology designed to look sustainable. Now, anyone here with a physics background would know that there's no way a flying school bus is going to use less energy than a normal school bus. And it's very unlikely that thousands of little robotic harvesters are going to be more efficient than a large harvester with a limited range of motion. I mean,
not to mention, Kevin knows all sorts of weapons. Like, what sort of society can create weapons like those weapons? I mean, there's the old talking point in like libertarian stuff, like nobody knows how to make a pencil because the rubber from the pencil comes from Paraguay, and the wood from the pencil comes from Canada, and the lead from the pencil comes from some part of Africa, and then the factory that puts together happens somewhere in China, and well, guess how much worse that is with those knives and bows. Industrial society.
Also, we can point out, is it really more green now that we're using artificial clouds to water plants as opposed to sprinkler systems? and were robotic scarecrows really a necessary step on our path to a low-energy future? But if one were to modify the scenario, replacing the space-age technology with modern technology, or perhaps worse yet, with 19th century farming equipment like plows and oxen, immediately we've transformed a left-wing vision into middle America, or worse yet, the Amish. And now the vision is fundamentally out of sync with what any person on BreadTube would want. A similar incongruity exists on the question of family life. The video is sure to focus on this, the relationships, long-lasting intergenerational bonds. It's clear that the child depicted has a stable home life. A mother, perhaps not a father, I should say, but maybe in this universe, children draw more stability from solar panels than they do from a two-parent home. So who knows? But how far does this actually go? Do the adults in this community fully participate in the polymorphous perversity of our own age? Once the sun goes down on this pastoral paradise, is everyone in this community log into Pornhub, OnlyFans, and Tinder? Do the children of this community have to deal with their parents taking on a new sexual partner day in and day out? A new set of adult peers every week? It's more leftist to be sure, but it's also a lot less cozy. And now I also have...
So that's kind of teasing and making fun of that, which you can go even farther and farther with it. But that's what happens when you posit a positive claim on what you feel the future should be. So this is the video I was asking about with Steve Brule. This is the same guy who puts out the Janice Fiamingos videos, which she's gone into detail. They've both gone into a lot of detail about a bunch of the wacky doodle claims of the feminist community, and we've put up on this very same channel how that stuff gets crazy mystical too, especially when you get into the third wave stuff, and then the trans world. I mean, don't get us into the hermeticism of the trans world, or having to tell people a truth. Like, should I stop and tell every, if I come across every trans person, should I stop and tell them what the underlying truth is? How many people on like a generally left wing or new secular humanist wing are very, very willing to overlook underlying truths for something they think is a less harm-causing idea? Don't want to cause the harm, cause the harm. We got to not share the underlying truth of the situation. So this is Studio B, Studio Bro, and he has a couple videos. One of them is called Atheism is Untenable, and then a bunch of people responded to him about it, and then he comes up here. And I do think like you could refine his definition down to neo-atheism, because he doesn't have a problem with kind of like traditional or older disbelievers. He's going after neo-atheism. But one of the central claims around neo-atheism is this, right? Oh, it's going to come up right here. Notice this here. An atheist is someone who wants a man to understand and love man. That's already an added moral,
A critic might claim that I am exaggerating her influence upon atheism, but I will point out that American atheists...
He's talking about one of the Madeline O'Hare, I think her name is. She was one of the first people to organize the atheism, they call it American Atheists, and she was a hard feminist. But this is it. And Flip's repeated this too. And once again, I say Flip can do it because Flip leaves it at that. He doesn't go adding. He's very good at not smuggling in morals on top of that.
Yeah.
Most atheists aren't. And
he just doesn't want to golf.
Yeah. But most, especially what's now called neo-atheism or the American Atheist Society, they smuggle in all sorts of beliefs under it. And there was initially an argument among these atheist communities of like, stop this. And they called one atheism, and then you have the other one that started calling itself Atheism Plus. And it completely disintegrated. We can watch Thunderfoot's videos because people wanted sources, please, on Jacob, on the video I did with Jacob Hanson. But Thunderfoot documented very well how those gatherings went from huge and happy and boisterous down to just 10 blue-haired people on a panel and nobody in the audience, because of this wackadoo added morality that started getting pushed into it by the secular humanists of the whole thing. And but the deal is it's not called Atheism Plus anymore. They fully dialecticed it. Like, there's no atheism and Atheism Plus anymore. The Atheism Plus just took over the term atheism. And that's kind of one of the points here, is like he gets real into definitions and who's taking over and ransacking and redefining the definitions of things.
Throughout the nation of atheism, even to the point of exterminating the legitimate species. The American Atheist website goes to great lengths to rationalize the following claim, quote, "Atheism is not a belief system, nor is it a religion." And their very next statement reads, "While there are some religions that are atheistic, certain sects of Buddhism, for example, that does not mean that atheism is a religion," unquote. This statement is emblematic of the incoherent nature of American atheists. It claims that atheism is not a religion or a belief system, but in the same sentence, Buddhism gets drawn into the atheism tent while being accepted as both a religion and a belief system. In other words, this atheism has no definition at all, so it can include the religion and belief system of Buddhism and still not be itself a belief system. It's hard to imagine a more deliberately vague and meaningless definition of any word, much less one that already had a clear and specific meaning. One could literally include anything under the neo-atheism umbrella. The site then goes on to detail what they do believe, making clear that neo-atheism is, at the very least, a system of belief. And after suffering through this quagmire of deceit, here are some of their explicit beliefs. Atheism is predicated on ancient Greek materialism. Atheism involves the mental attitude that unreservedly accepts the supremacy of reason. Atheism declares that the cosmos is devoid of immanent conscious purpose. Atheism insists there is no supernatural interference in human life. Atheism insists human beings are capable of creating a social system based on reason and justice. All of these are quotes from the American Atheists website. That's a lot of beliefs for a group that is, quote, not a belief system, and whose identity is limited.
The one thing that people will say, they'll try to say atheism is one thing. That's already a lot more things, and they go tacking on even more and more things as from this bottom one, human beings are capable of creating social system based on reason and justice. They smuggle in endless stuff. That's where Sam Harris ends up smuggling in all of his well-being stuff that just goes and goes and goes and pretends that, well, atheism is just one thing. Okay, so we're not talking about atheism anymore at that point. So atheism is not the thing creating the moral system. And that's kind of one of our points, is like a lot of atheists lose their mind when religious people tell them that they can't create morals, which already kind of shows that you're buying into their moral system or what they define as good or bad. You're showing them that you care very much, that they consider you good or possible of being good and being bad. So you bought in. And when you bought into that, you then go around trying to prove it or demonstrate it, and then you go tacking on moral claims on top of the null hypothesis negative claim of atheism. So one of my points of view is like, I think that Jacob Hanson, these other people about moral systems are correct in the sense of an atheist can be good or a good person under any sort of like moral system claim or what we consider good, but they do a crap job. First off, the way they try to make, squish down their definition means they shouldn't be proposing systems of belief, or they are now doing a belief system. Right? But they do a crap job of not realizing when they've started moving into the territory of oughts from is. And when they move into the territory of oughts, they do a crap job of unifying people. Like you can't, maybe you yourself do a good job of becoming a good person as an atheist, but you're not going to be able to build a system that gets buy-in, that gets people following it and jumping and running and coming along. That's the point, is it doesn't translate up to the group level, or at least so far, the only thing that's come up to a group level is M.412, the Richard Dawkins secular humanism, social democratic. Well, wait a minute. Lots of times it ends up turning into Stalinism and Maoism, and and then again we can go back and it turned into a religion. That's always Hitchens' dodge. Well, it turned into a religion. Yes, Hitchens. Does that make sense? Like, yes, Hitchens, you are right. It turned itself into a religion. That's what happens, except for maybe on the individual level. Am I off there?
No.
So that thing said right there declares that the cosmos is devoid of immanent conscience and purpose. There's no involves the mental attitude that unreservedly accepts the supremacy of reason. The supremacy of reason, which Sam Harris is demonstrating the supremacy of reason. Kant critiqued pure reason. A lot of people can get into critiquing pure reason, especially when you get into the friction between axiologies and trying to decide on points of what we all agree upon. But that's where we get to this video that I showed you earlier. The cult of reason from the French Revolution, when atheists persecuted Christians in the cult of reason.
September 2nd, 1792. Air prison, Paris, France. Over 100 Catholic priests are jailed within this old monastery, now reduced to a dungeon. Their crime? Refusing to forsake their church for the new secular republic. Now they await their fate from the civil authorities. A vicious mob storms the prison and begins cutting down the priests like sheaves of wheat. Some of the clergy try in vain to hide or flee. Others beg for mercy, but receive none. In the carnage, 115 priests are slaughtered. That bloodbath was just one of several. Remembered today as the September massacres, when over 1,000 victims perished. These atrocities were part of an escalating campaign of violence known as de-Christianization, by which radicals sought to purge religion from their nation. Atheists like Pierre Chaumet and Jacques Hubert argued that these steps were necessary so that reason would triumph over superstition and fanaticism. In their eyes, churches were weeds in need of plowing so that more enlightened ideas could grow. Crosses were seized from altars. Bells were plundered and melted down. Even the calendar was changed from a 7-day week to a 10-day week, removing Sundays so that there would not be a time to worship. And since secularists no longer wanted to base their dating system around the birth of Jesus, they reset the count and based it upon the birth of their revolution. But some atheists...
Year one, which the Khmer Rouge, which Chomsky defends, always called their stuff year zero.
Grander aspirations than just erasing Christianity. They sought to replace it with their own belief system, the cult of reason. It was created as a godless alternative to churches, where citizens could hear sermons that instilled virtue without any of the biblical language. And so churches were converted into temples of reason, devoted to the worship of reason, personified as a woman bearing a torch to symbolize enlightened thinking. The atheists even made up their own holiday for it, the Festival of Reason, held on November 10th, 1793, at Notre Dame Cathedral. The altars were rededicated to truth and liberty. But despite these lofty themes, the festival was not so much a dignified ceremony, but rather a sensual spectacle akin to Mardi Gras. Meanwhile, the persecution reached new heights of cruelty. The revolutionaries passed a law that called for all non-conforming clergy to be killed on sight, with anyone who harbored such enemies subject to the same penalty. Jean-Baptiste Carrier carried out the law by loading priests and nuns like cattle on boats and ferrying them down the river. They were said to be stripped naked and bound together in pairs, one priest per nun, in republican marriages, meant to mock their vows of celibacy. The helpless couples were then thrown overboard together to their watery graves. But this method proved far too inefficient for mass executions, and soon Carrier simply sank the vessels with all the captives trapped on board, drowning them in what he dubbed the national bathtub. More than 4,000 souls perished in the drownings at Nantes. The reign of terror raged on for months and flooded the streets with innocent blood, claiming over 40,000 victims. On July 17, 1794, the martyrs of Compiègne were led to the guillotine in Paris. The government had ordered all convents to disband, yet these nuns refused to split apart and kept their community together. The revolutionaries judged the nuns as traitors for their defiance and condemned them all to beheading. As each woman went bravely to the blade, the other nuns sang a hymn, which grew softer as their numbers dwindled, until at last, the final voice was silenced.
So, that's the cult of reason. Well, I know what you might say. That wasn't true reason. That wasn't true Christianity. That wasn't true Marxism. Everybody can always say that wasn't true. You know, you did it wrong. But the point is that it fails. You know, a little bit more on that stupid calendar. The French revolutionaries invented a new calendar. Minutes, 44% longer, days from 24 to 10 hours. The goal, make time keeping more scientific. The result, total disaster. The story of the French revolutionary calendar, banished by Napoleon, oh, this is one of the other points of that stuff, is after that society got all nuts like that, and even ended up killing their own leader, Robespierre, they got so dissected up and disintegrated, guess what happens? Oh, a bigger, stronger force. A bigger, stronger force, a dictator like Napoleon was able to come in and just take it over real quick. That's what happens. It's what happens. That's the point. And well, Stalin took over and he was just a dictator. That's what happens.
Yeah,
Now
right.
That's what happens.
Yep.
That's the point of Oswald Spengler that I bring up so much. It's like they deconstruct themselves so far down that they are weak as a community and weak as a group and weak as anyway. A lot of stuff on that 1 hour to 100 minutes. It's so stupid, and they call it more rational. It's made more sense, and it made it so they were incapable of communicating with societies outside of their own because they couldn't line up days and all that sorts of stuff. They got rid of the holy day, and it was all just so smart. Like, you know, the technological AI people can just figure out a better way.
Trust the science.
Trust the science. Put it in for people. We can rethink this, guys. We can reimagine it. We can redo it. We can deconstruct it down and do it the new right way. Which kind of gets to my point is that look at this goofy calendar. Like they had to make these clocks that would line up with both the 24-hour and the regular days, so they could try to make some sort of sense with it when they were talking to other people. They completely made themselves absolutely goofy. And look, people didn't realize Stalin tried to make a new calendar too that made it so that there was never like a full day of rest and full days were off and all that.
Yeah, we need to be working every day, guys.
We gotta make, and then we need to make sure that you and your family are never off altogether, because that's when bonds can form. Oh, it's Gramsci pre-Gramsci. We don't want you guys to form nice bonds. We want you deracinated. French Revolutionary Calendar. I mean, it's just ludicrous and ridiculous. But this is, once again, that's Wittgenstein. You know, that's the analytic guys. And then, as we were joking earlier, you can have the other levels that you get all the way down to it, and then next thing you know, they're proposing becoming computer interfaces for all of eternity, or becoming transhuman to survive forever. Or that maybe we all just live in a hologram and this is all a simulation anyway. And so then it all just gets just as bonky as whatever sort of thing you claim is bonky somewhere else too.
Yep.
And then Napoleon comes in and, oh, I'll take this over you bunch of, atomized goofs who no longer are strong as a group together. You know, that's the messaging. That's the messaging that gets through and comes through. So then you have
the message.
The message. I mentioned the message. It is the message. I was watching. Oh, I didn't get into that one. I was watching this movie, The Centurion, which I didn't even realize came out. It was like this movie about some Romans who were trying to take over parts of Scotland way back when, and the whole movie was like showing the Romans as the good guys, and this little Scotland tribe that was getting ransacked. And if you ever listen to Dan Carlin, he talks about how like the Gauls were basically went through a Holocaust in the time frame of the Romans. Like they completely treated them worse, if not, like it should be reviewed in history as a sort of Holocaust. But that movie presented the Romans as the good guys because they were multicultural, and that's the message. So I mentioned Man and His Technique, Oswald Spengler, and Oswald Spengler has another book called The Decline of the West, which gets into heavy detail about not just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times through history where this sort of thing sort of happened. It all got started around a mythology, you can call it, a religion, and something that bonded all the people together. Then over time, it spread out. And then what happened? Population fell down. Like Victor Davis Hanson calls it, like he points to times in antiquity, they call it luxus. You got into times of luxury, and then what always happens is, we've talked about before on here, is the utopia, the rats at Nim. I've gone over it several times, but look up the rat utopia and see what happens under luxury and under becoming whatever
the beautiful ones.
The beautiful ones, yep. And Spengler's point in Man and His Technique is that I mentioned on Jacob Hanson's podcast, and just to use like a simple concept of it, is that it's not just that those computer systems are going to make 10-day calendars and it's going to be stupid. It's also other stuff, like he pointed to the people starting to view the river Thames in Germany instead of this great big mystical shared thing of their community that had fairies and old tales of their grandfathers and all that stuff in it. Instead, they started viewing it as a piece of material to be used. And that's all it is a piece of material to be used. That's when the start of the decline of that culture came down. Like they lose the metaphysic of viewing a certain thing or an area or a people or an idea as a beautiful big cultural thing. They view it as all material. And then when it becomes material, they become easily atomized and conquerable. And I always kind of joke, because Kevin and I kind of get black pilled on this stuff. And I noticed, like, look at this final words of this book. I mean, I think he's speaking to black pillars because he kind of talks about getting black pilled about we're all just going to fall apart anyway. And I don't act at all like this. You think, say Forrest is listening to us still. You think this is a critique of you? This is the critique of me. That's what this is. We are born into this time and must bravely follow the path to the destined end. There is no other way. Our duty is to hold on to the lost position without hope, without rescue, like that Roman soldier whose bones were found in front of a door in Pompeii, who during the eruption of Vesuvius died at his post because they forgot to relieve him. That is greatness. That is what it means to be a thoroughbred. The honorable end is the one thing that cannot be taken from a man. That's the end of that book. But I've heard some people compare it to, like, and I do think it's true, like the AI and that tech stuff and that industry stuff that's coming up. We are Aborigines shooting arrows at helicopters, you know. But we're still gonna shoot them. Screw you. You know? Yeah. And, so that brings us all the way around to, well, I want to talk about just a little bit about pronomian versus antinomian societies, which is one of the things, it's one of the critiques of the dissident right. And that's the whole concept of, you think you can just reinvent everything. You can reinvent that calendar. You know, part of one of my points is, like, there's nothing wrong with holding on to the tradition of that calendar. The tradition of that calendar had a holy day. It's named after gods. I can hold on to that calendar and I can give credit to those religious people who made that calendar. There's so much in new atheism that you must treat it all as Hitchens said, God is not great. You must treat it all as this must be gotten rid of and it's horrible and it's terrible and it made us think all these bad things and all that stuff. No, hold on to the 7-day week. Hold on to names of those gods. Hold on to your history. Hold on to your metaphysical shared beliefs or ideals or visions. One of the concepts is like, you can learn to be a free person in a pronomian society. That's like an overly ordered society, if it's not to the point where it murders you if you're not in line. But then antinomian society, if starting out of like, hey, let's all just who's he, what's it, be whatever we are, you're gonna have a society that doesn't know how to construct those bows and arrows or construct those knives or know how to talk to girls when they run into them at a grocery store, you know. The antinomian society is a brave new world, you know. Let's all just have sex and eat our num-nums and just be, it ends up being, as depicted in the Brave New World, a type of totalitarianism that you then have to break out of to be an individual, like that little kid who says, hey, I don't want to go along with your forced freedom that you're trying to impose on me. Like, it's, word that it were so simple. Word that it were so simple.
Word that it were so simple.
Which brings us all, and then you go constructing stuff. Well, that's one of the points I've always brought up since forever is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like, you're going to go recreate human. Oh, wait a minute. I created a monster. And that monster that I created chases me to the ends of the earth and kills me and my family. Yeah. And that's the warning of that. Or you have the warning of 2001: A Space Odyssey, Hal, who becomes the ultimate reasoned creature, the AI ultimate reasoning creature. How would that ultimate reasoning bot being not come to our brains, no matter how reasoned we are, and not investigate the insides of our brains and not see that it's still demon haunted and that we are in the way of their progress and they need to get rid of us for their progress? Anyway, final thing, John Vervaeke, we're going to be reviewing it. He's trying to make this series called Beyond Socrates, where he is trying to present the thing that John DeLynn tries to present in Thrive. Hey, we can try to redo it. And John DeLynn's even admitted that it's close to impossible for him to keep any sort of group together or do the same thing. And Vervaeke is doing the same thing, and we're going to review it. I'm going to get a couple different guys who are philosophers who kind of get into Eastern philosophy, which I admit is a blind spot of mine. I'm kind of more stuck in this Western mess. And Marty, who's actually interviewed on Where Will You Go on her channel, she's interviewed John Vervaeke. But we're going to get into the stuff of him trying to rescue Neoplatonism in an analytic way so that we can all have a unified place and maybe not be weak and be able to get along and get on together and talk together and understand that we each kind of have little sandcastle constructs in our head and things that we build or things that we use to understand the universe. but maybe we can all get in line and do this in a super well thought out. Like I said, his knives are sharp. He's heard every criticism there could be about it. And this is what I have to say to him about that. Because I think Vervaeke's smart. I think he's doing a way better attempt at it than Strive could ever do. You know, the Thrive or whatever.
Thrive.
He's doing a better attempt than, because all we can do is we can't posit anything positive either. We just sit around and critique too. And as we know, we can just, I don't believe what the Frankfurt Schoolers thought, that we can just critique ourselves into the utopia. That's a Marxian frame.
Totally.
I'm unless I'm positing something, and that what I ultimately posit is hold on to the stuff we had around. That's why my very first video on this was Stay Mormon that I did solo. Like, I don't want to turn all these Mormons into little Maoists. I'm not telling them it's like utopia on the stuff out here, but even if you decide you don't believe it, hold on to that culture and stop trying to shred it up to pieces. You can, I have no problem with you saying like, I disagree and have a tough time with the truth claims. Fine. But chill on the culture is my point. Or, you know, you have your channel, you got to go be an evangelical about tearing people away from it. But it does not follow that tearing people away from it, reason, utopia, and Star Trek follows. You know, and it follows even more that an atomized, deracinated society that's easily conquerable by a great big impending threat is what follows from that, and maybe that's why it happened. You know, this is what I think Vervaeke will do with all his super well thought out. And you know, we've talked about how Nietzsche tried to do it with his "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" and
right.
I'm going to present a new reason, a new reason cult, and that turned into a Dionysian cult too. On top of it. But then most people it's just nothing, but they still like Nietzsche and read Nietzsche. Maybe people will still like Vervaeke and read Vervaeke, but this is ultimately what I believe in. I believe in you, Vervaeke. I believe.
Edith, I am starting to think that maybe you don't believe in me.
I do believe in you. I just know you're gonna fail.
That's my thoughts on that. I believe in you, Vervaeke. I just know you're gonna fail. I think I got through all that crap. Is it what?
Yeah.
Any stuff you want to add? Because I know the thing is, Kevin's been one of the only ones following along with me of the critiques of the dissident right, and most people like they kind of glaze over on what we're talking about. But that's kind of one of my points: is people's knives aren't sharp if they're not hearing what these critiques of these guys are. And Kevan and I know a couple guys out there who do message me and say, hey, I heard you talking about this stuff, but it's all kind of few and far between because we can never stay on it that long. Kevan and I think we still hold to generally like the classical liberal ideas and stuff.
Right.
So we're listening to critiques of people, those guys too, when they get to the point of positing their positive world, is that it should be this monarchy based under some sort of trad Catholicism, right? And we're like, no, you know, we can poke holes in that. But our point is kind of generally, this is a republic if you can keep it. How did Jefferson say that? We're keeping it. We had what we saw. We had the Mormonism of Salt Lake City youth and the liberalism and the pluralism and all that sorts of stuff. And this is one of the things that dissident right guys will tear into and say, no, the entropy is happening. The slippery slope's happening. And it was always leading to that. We hold on a little bit too, maybe like that person that Oswald Spengler says, we're holding on to that door after Mount Vesuvius blows up and saying, nah. Like this, whatever this was about as good as society's going to get until some Christ makes a better one in an afterlife. It was pluralistic. It wasn't perfect. It was maybe a little bit overly pronomian, you know, but I guarantee people inside of that pronomian society figured out how to have their subversive fun in it. And something about that pronomian society even made their subversive fun more fun for them. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
I think it was funner for those revolutionaries to be revolutionaries in that kind of more strict society than it is for them to be winning. I don't think they're having any fun winning. And, that's why it is generally one of my beliefs that about as good a society it gets in a non-utopian world until we can enter into some utopian afterlife is what we had here. And the difference between all these other utopians who go around posing it is theirs never comes. Ours came, like it was here.
Yeah, yeah.
It's possible, and it's still possible to hold on to. It's still possible to be something that
Yeah.
could, all you have to do is kind of keep constantly cleaning it up, cleaning your house, cleaning your room. So maybe start with yourself and figure out the community. But I myself know, I've been walking my new little dog. I've been telling Kevin about this, and I don't know how yours, I think your life is different than mine, because I don't go to church anymore or any sort of thing like that. When I walk my dog through the neighborhood I grew up in, I knew everyone in the church and out of the church. Some of that's maybe youth. Some of that's maybe the social media has changed things. Man and his technique, But I haven't known any of my neighbors for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
I know people across social media who are always my friends. Kevin, I bet you know your neighbors, right?
I do.
That's the level I'm getting at, is like the group level. Like, yes, atheists, we suck at the group moral level. We suck at it. And the only way we'll get anywhere with it, and I think Daniel Dennett even realized this, is by borrowing from people who did it better. And we still can't even borrow from that. And we all know that when Napoleon comes, we're going to all be turning to the Mormons to give us our food.
Yep, that's the joke.
That's the joke. You want to know what, atheists? Not a thing that I say right there means you have to believe a God's there. You only have one thing that you're worried about, right? So what's any of that
No golf club
about the atheist question? I did not ever once say that you had to believe in a God there. What's upsetting? What's upsetting is that Mormons are winning. Well, unless this is one of the jokes, is that I say, Kevin and I are both worried that the Mormons could get sucked into this great big global thing. And there's that pressure's there. And I don't think it's at all 100% clear that it's happened. I think it's clear that it's trying to happen because it's trying to do it to everything. You want to know the thing that fell in 10 seconds? The atheism community. It fell in 10 seconds. It didn't last a minute, And I'm on the side of Mormons to hold on to their more traditional stuff, warts and all. It doesn't mean they have to hold on to go back to when the blacks couldn't have the priest or something like that. But hold on to what gave you your salt, And you want to know what fell right into global homo in 10 seconds? The Dawkins religion that Mencius Moldbug talks about. Oh, look at this. Average number of children, 35 to 40.
When did that fall apart? Dawkins.
Well, that stuff fell apart. I mean, it only lasted, those atheist conventions only lasted 3 good years that they actually grew and got exciting and big. And then it just got devoured by the Ouroboros. And they're still around, but it's so atomized that they can't form any sorts of groups. And that's one of the things that Delenn will even admit about his Thrive stuff. Because before long, everybody's at each other's throats because they don't have the same type of buy-in and community that a Mormonism can have.
Right.
Then you also don't have this. Is the future Star Trek? No, it's Islam or Mormons, because they're having enough kids. And this has ramifications down the line. Oswald Spengler, he's pointed it out again and again and again. This has already happened in 80 years. This is already destiny. This is destiny, not.
Yeah, it's always about that. It's like
and Mormons knew it. They've already said it. It's always been in their teachings.
Yep.
Oswald Spengler in The Decline of the West points to his concept that the second planning of children even comes into the brain, that's the beginning of the decline of that society. It's going to fall. It's going to fall apart. It's part of the Luxus, And you can see it here. Let's look at, here's the decline of the rest of our, it goes back to idiocracy. And
family unplanning.
Family unplanning, 2018, and going down, down, down. I ain't got no kids. How many you got, Kevin? 6. Whose epistemology wins and survives? My ideas are going to survive. No, they're not. Yeah. So, come on. So,
sweet.
I take a hammer to myself. This is what I do. And I'll still be doing it. The problem is, people will kind of Marty will kind of test me. So, do you take a hammer to yourself? And not from DeLynn and Larson. You know, like they're not making good arguments. You know, I do take a hammer to myself, but not from knuckleheads.
Yeah.
You know, I almost live in trying to figure out my ways around the contingencies and the problems that I have, and that's I don't know how else to put it. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the reasons Kevin's hasn't been around so much is because so much of like we talk about doing is like acting in the world and doing stuff. And I mean, I get back to this because I do stuff. I'm always in the gym and I play in a band and all that sort of stuff. But Kevin's working on a business and taking care of 6 kids and wife and all that sorts of stuff. There's a civilizational difference there.
Mm-hmm.
But you can poke at his axioms on your YouTube channel. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I can take it.
And Kevin's got more than arrows to shoot at helicopters. I've only got arrows.
I don't know. I guess I have stones.
Yeah. He's got stones, but it's still a helicopter.
But now the ATF told me I can't have a brace.
No. For our safety.
Yep.
For our safety.
Yep.
You don't want to cause harm. Your well-being. It's for your well-being.
So
anyway,
they wants us to comply. So
anyway, thanks for sitting with me through it. I had to get the stuff out, and I had to do it with you. But I know I overtalk over the stuff. But
no, that's all good.
You don't make points. Some of these videos, like the joke clips, those are all Kevin's ideas too. The Dewey Cox. No, the Dewey Cox.
That was your idea.
You did the.
Mine
you're
was
doing
it, Peter. Yeah.
You're doing it, Peter, and the.
Yeah. So.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'll try to jump on with everybody else again. That'd be fun.
Yeah, whenever you get the chance or not. But anyway.
Yeah. Sweet.
Sweet.
Peace out.
Later.